Okay, let's unpack this. For decades, really, the way we've thought about motivation, it's been dominated by this classic carrot and stick idea.
Absolutely. Workplaces, schools, even how we try to change our own habits. It's all based on external rewards or punishments.
Right, what Daniel Pink calls motivation 2.0. But here's the thing we're diving into today. What if that whole model is, well, fundamentally flawed, especially for the long haul stuff like self-improvement or recovery?
That's exactly the argument in Drive. Pink really turns this idea on its head. He argues that true, lasting motivation, that real drive, it doesn't come from outside.
It comes from inside.
Precisely, from three core intrinsic needs. He calls them AMP.
AMP, autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
You got it. Autonomy. The urge to direct our own lives. Mastery. The desire to get better and better at something that matters. And purpose. The yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves.
Okay, so for you, the learner, listening right now, our mission in this deep dive is pretty critical. We want to take this AMP framework and apply it specifically to sustained self-improvement, to recovery.
Yeah, how do you actually move past relying on fear or shame or those external shoulds that wear you down?
And instead, find those internal engines, those drivers that genuinely work for the long run, maybe even for the rest of your life.
Well, to really grasp why we need this new model, Pink says we first have to see why the old one, the carrot and stick model, just doesn't cut it anymore. It's incompatible with modern life.
Incompatible how?
He points out three big compatibility problems. First, and this is kind of fundamental, we aren't just profit maximizers. We're not just driven by external reward.
We're purpose maximizers, too. We look for meaning, for engagement, not just, a paycheck or a gold star.
Exactly. We're wired for more than just transactions. Second, the science backs this up. Behavioral economics, people like Kahneman, they've shown we aren't these perfectly rational economic robots that old theories assumed.
Right. Our decisions are messy, full of emotions, biases, social stuff. Money isn't the only thing we're trying to get more of.
Not by a long shot. And the third problem, it's just the reality of work today for so many people. It's not factory line drudgery anymore.
It's creative, it's complex, it often requires you to manage yourself, right?
Totally. So that old command and control system designed for routine tasks, it just doesn't work when the job needs ingenuity, collaboration, genuine interest. You can't force engagement with a stick.
Okay, so let's start with that stick. The punishment side of the equation. Why is relying on external pressure or punishment so ineffective, especially long term?
Well, it might seem like it works in the moment, to stop a behavior, but it creates a lot of problems down the line.
And we should probably clarify something B.F. Skinner talked about. He made a distinction, didn't he?
Yes, a useful one. He said punishment is specifically when someone intentionally sets up a consequence to stop you doing something unwanted. Think like a fine for parking illegally.
Okay, so that's about suppression.
Right. Whereas aversive control is using something unpleasant to make you do something. Like that annoying beeping in your car till you buckle your seatbelt.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
One stops, one starts. But both rely on external unpleasantness.
Exactly. And here's where it gets physiologically interesting. Too much of that external force, especially if it's overwhelming or confusing, can actually shut the system down.
You mean like literally?
Yeah, look at Pavlov's original dog experiments. When the dogs faced stimuli that were really weak or way too strong or just plain weird and contradictory, like confusing signals about whether they'd get a reward or not, they often just stopped responding.
Their brains kind of checked out.
It's called cortical inhibition.
Yeah.
It's the brain basically saying, okay, this is too much, I can't process this, and it hits the brakes. In extreme cases, the dogs would get drowsy, even fall asleep.
Wow. So intense external pressure doesn't necessarily make you try harder. It can make you just give up. Freeze.
It's a coping mechanism, a fail-safe against overload. And think about the parallel for recovery. If you're facing overwhelming external demands or crushing shame, sometimes the response isn't more effort. It's shutting down, avoiding, freezing.
Okay, but what about goals? We're always told goals are good motivators. They give us focus.
They generally do help us focus, yes. But there's a big warning label, especially when those goals are imposed on us by others.
Like sales targets or standardized test scores you mentioned.
Exactly. Researchers from places like Harvard and Wharton found something counterintuitive. While goals help tune out distractions, make us try harder, externally imposed goals can have some really dangerous side effects.
Like what?
Well, if the only thing that matters is hitting that target someone else set for you, it can create pressure to cut corners, maybe fudge the numbers, or act unethically just to make the goal. The goal itself becomes the justification.
Which brings us back to this idea of looking beyond just the individual, right? The bad apple problem. Philip Zimbardo talked a lot about this.
Yeah, his work, especially analyzing the Stanford prison experiment, is a stark reminder. We tend to focus on punishing the individual, the bad apple, but we often ignore the situation, the system around them.
Bad systems create bad situations, which then lead to bad behaviors.
Precisely. If you only blame the person, you missed the coercive external environment that might have driven their actions. In recovery, think about rigid, externally imposed rules, maybe things like mandatory meetings or arbitrary metrics that don't resonate internally. They can become part of that bad system.
And all this external pressure, it creates a kind of internal conflict, doesn't it? This leads us to Leon Festinger and cognitive dissonance.
A really powerful concept. Festinger's idea is simple at its core. We humans strive for internal consistency. We want our beliefs and actions to line up.
And when they don't, like if I believe something is wrong but I'm doing it anyway.
That creates dissonance and uncomfortable psychological tension. And we're motivated to reduce that discomfort.
How do we do that if we're forced to do something we don't believe in?
We basically have two options psychologically. Either change the behavior, but often that's not possible if compliance is forced, or
Change the belief.
change the belief to match the behavior. There's a classic experiment that shows this brilliantly.
Oh yeah, the boring task one. Let's walk through that. It really makes the point.
Okay, so students were asked to do this incredibly tedious, mind-numbing task for about an hour, turning pegs or something equally dull.
Yeah, truly awful.
Then afterwards, the experimenter asked them to do a little favor. They needed someone to tell the next participant, who was waiting outside, that the task was actually really fun and interesting. Essentially, to lie.
Okay.
And they offered to pay the students for telling this lie. Here's the crucial part. Some students were offered $20, a decent sum back then, to lie. Others were offered only $1.
$20 versus $1. Huge difference. So what happened?
The results were fascinating. The students paid $20 to lie. They lied, took the money, and afterwards, they still thought the task was incredibly boring.
Why?
Because they had an easy external justification for their behavior. Why did I lie? Because I got paid $20. The large reward resolved the dissonance. Their private opinion didn't need to change.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the $1 group?
That's where it gets interesting. They also lied, but afterwards. They rated the boring task as significantly more enjoyable than the $20 group did.
Wait, they convinced themselves it wasn't so bad for just $1.
Exactly. They experienced high dissonance. I just did this boring thing, then I lied about it, and all I got was a lousy dollar. It's not enough reason. So to reduce that uncomfortable feeling, their minds unconsciously shifted their attitude.
They thought, well, maybe it wasn't that boring after all. Maybe I kind of found it interesting.
Precisely. The insufficient external justification forced an internal change. They had to make the belief, the task was okay, consistent with the behavior. I told someone it was fun for almost no money.
So the big takeaway here is kind of ironic, isn't it? A large external reward might get compliance, but it undermines internal conviction.
Whereas a minimal incentive, paradoxically, can sometimes lead to genuine belief change because the person has to generate their own reasons for acting. The carrot, if it's too big, actually stops you from internalizing the value.
Okay, so if carrots and sticks, especially big ones, aren't the answer for long-term motivation and belief, we need to look inward. Let's talk about that first pillar, autonomy, the drive to direct our own lives.
This really marks a shift in thinking, especially in management. Douglas McGregor was a key figure here, challenging the old assumptions about employees.
The old Theory X, right? People hate work, they're lazy, you got to control them.
Yeah, the command and control model. McGregor proposed Theory Y as an alternative. He suggested that actually people taking an interest in their work is natural. Creativity isn't rare, it's widespread.
And under the right conditions, people don't just accept responsibility, they actively seek it out.
Exactly. It flips the script from external coercion to fostering internal motivation, giving people more control.
But we should probably inject a dose of realism here, maybe from Skinner again. He had a point about true self-reliance, didn't he?
He did. It's a thoughtful check on the idea of pure autonomy. Skinner argued that no one ever becomes truly self-reliant in an absolute sense. We're always dependent in ways on those who taught us.
The people who shaped our environment, selected what we learned, defined the choices available to us.
Right. Our autonomy always operates within systems and constraints that were often chosen for us, at least initially. It's a complex dance between inherited structures and self-direction.
That's a really important nuance. Still, within those constraints, we do have a capacity for self-direction, right? Albert Bandura talked about this.
Yes, Bandura highlighted what he called self-reactive functions.
Hmm.
Things like setting our own standards, judging our own performance, giving ourselves praise or criticism based on those standards.
So even if the playground was built by someone else, we get to choose how we play in it to some extent.
That's a good way to put it. We have this capacity for self-regulation, for self-direction, that allows us to navigate and shape our behavior within the given environment.
So how do we actually use that capacity? How do we operationalize autonomy, make it real? Thomas Harris had an interesting idea, especially in relationships, the adult contract.
This is a really practical tool. Thinking about, say, a parent-child dynamic. Instead of the parent laying down the law, parent-child, the idea is to create a statement of mutual expectations.
Discussed and agreed upon at an adult-to-adult level, like a negotiation between equals, almost.
Exactly. It's constantly revisited and restated. It validates the child's growing ability to use their own adult thinking, their rational side, for realistic self-control. It teaches self-governance, not just obedience.
And you can apply that to yourself, too, right? Making a realistic, flexible contract with yourself about your goals or habits, treating yourself like a capable adult.
Absolutely. It's about setting clear, mutually agreed upon terms with your own internal adult.
But autonomy isn't just about having freedom to choose, is it? Sometimes it's about the freedom from too many choices, the paradox of choice.
Oh, definitely. Barry Schwartz nailed this one. In modern life, we're often bombarded with options. Think about choosing a breakfast cereal or a phone plan or even, a path for self-improvement.
It's overwhelming. So many diets, therapies, books, gurus.
And the paradox is, having too many choices doesn't make us freer or happier. It often leads to paralysis. You can't decide, or dissatisfaction and regret after you do choose.
Because you keep wondering about all the other options you missed, the opportunity cost.
Exactly. You chose path A, but maybe path B, C, or Z would have been better. It creates anxiety. So for you, the learner, facing this vast landscape of recovery options, it can feel paralyzing.
So the path to feeling more autonomous and less stressed is to have fewer choices. Seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it's about managing the overload. We need to consciously decide which choices actually matter to us, focus our energy there, and learn to let the rest go.
Like intentionally limiting your options.
Yes. Choose one approach, commit to it for a time, and tune out the noise of the alternatives. Restricting options allows us to choose more decisively and feel better about the choices we make. Less regret.
But we really struggle with letting options go, don't we? Even meaningless ones. Dan Ariely found this.
He did. His experiments showed how we irrationally chase worthless options. People would keep clicking on, say, virtual doors in a game just to keep them from disappearing, even if there was no real benefit to keeping them open, and even if reopening them was easy.
We just can't stand the thought of losing an option, even a useless one. That fear of missing out, the FOMO.
It seems deeply ingrained. I just couldn't tolerate the idea of the loss, as Ariely put it. We fight to keep doors open, even when walking through one requires closing others.
So real autonomy isn't just about having choices. It's also about having the discipline and maturity to make a choice, commit to it, and consciously close off the distracting alternatives.
Okay, so we have autonomy, the need to direct our own lives. The second pillar of intrinsic motivation is mastery.
This is the urge to get better at stuff, right? To develop skills, to make progress in things that matter to us.
Exactly. It's about competence, growth, and the satisfaction that comes from learning and improving. It's the opposite of just, phoning it in. It requires practice.
And this is where habits come in. James Clear's work on habit formation is super relevant here. He breaks it down pretty simply.
Right, the 4 steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. That's the basic loop that drives any habit.
Cue triggers the brain. Craving provides the motivation, response is the habit itself, and reward satisfies the craving and teaches the brain the loop is worthwhile.
But Clear adds a really crucial layer to this, especially for mastery and long-term change. He talks about identity-based habits.
Okay, what's the difference between that and just like a regular goal?
Well, an outcome-based goal is focused on what you want to achieve. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to run a marathon.
Makes sense.
An identity-based habit focuses on who you want to become. I want to become the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. I want to become a healthy eater. I want to become a non-smoker.
So the focus shifts from the finish line to the kind of person you are on the journey.
Precisely. And this reframing is incredibly powerful for mastery. Because every time you perform the desired action, no matter how small, you're casting a vote for that new identity.
So doing one push-up isn't just one push-up.
It's a vote saying, I am the type of person who exercises. Writing one sentence is a vote for, I am a writer. Reading one page is a vote for, I am a reader.
It builds evidence for your brain that this new identity is real.
Exactly. It reinforces the identity, which then makes it easier to perform the habit consistently. You start acting in alignment with who you believe you are becoming.
This must be why Clear's 2-minute rule is so effective.
Absolutely. The rule is, when you start a new habit, make it take less than 2 minutes to do. The point isn't the immediate result, it's establishing the pattern.
Showing up, casting that vote for the identity.
Right. It's better to do less than you hoped than to do nothing at all. Meditate for 1 minute instead of skipping it. Do one push-up instead of none. Read one page.
Because doing something reinforces the identity while doing nothing reinforces the old one.
Exactly. You build momentum, you master the art of showing up first, then you can optimize later.
And this ties back to how learning actually sticks in our brains, doesn't it? The idea of repetition and meaning.
Yeah. Herman Ebbinghaus, way back, studied memory and learning. He found, unsurprisingly, that repetition helps things stick. The more you repeat something, the more stable the learning becomes.
But it wasn't just about raw repetition, was it?
No, and this is key for mastery. He found it took far fewer repetitions to memorize meaningful material like stanzas of poetry compared to meaningless nonsense syllables.
So when the practice, the habit, the thing you're trying to master is connected to something meaningful, like that new identity you're building.
It sticks better. It becomes more durable, more ingrained, meaning accelerates mastery.
Mastery isn't just about physical skills or habits, though. We can also master our minds, our thinking, particularly resilience.
Definitely. Martin Seligman's work on learned optimism is all about this. He talks about our explanatory style.
How we explain bad events to ourselves.
Exactly. It's about, as he puts it, the power of non-negative thinking. He studied competitive teams, like a specific New Jersey Nets basketball team that was really struggling.
What was going on with them?
They had high expectations, but started the season with some crushing losses. They became, in Seligman's words, mentally shipwrecked. And it showed in how they explained their failures.
How so?
They used a pessimistic explanatory style. They saw losses as permanent, we'll always lose like this, this means we're bad at everything, and personal, it's my fault, I'm fundamentally flawed.
And that kind of thinking just guarantees more failure.
Pretty much. It killed their motivation and performance. But Seligman found you could train them to change that style by teaching them to explain setbacks differently, to see them as transient. That was a bad game, but next time will be different. Specific, we struggled with defense tonight, but our offense was okay. And external, or at least changeable. The refs made some bad calls, or we need to adjust our strategy.
Shifting the explanation changes the emotional and motivational impact.
Dramatically. By mastering their explanatory style, the team's performance improved. Cognitive mastery is about controlling that internal narrative around adversity.
Which links straight into self-talk, the actual words we use inside our head.
Right. Angela Duckworth points out that the psychiatrist Aaron Beck, a pioneer of cognitive therapy, argued that a patient's thoughts, their self-talk, should be the main target of therapy.
Because it's not the event itself, but our interpretation of the event that drives our feelings and actions.
Exactly. The objective thing happens. Maybe you slip up on a new habit, but it's the subjective interpretation, I'm such a failure, versus, okay, that happened, what can I learn, that determines what happens next.
So mastery includes mastering that internal conversation, making sure your self-talk is casting votes for the identity you want, not against it.
All right, so we've covered autonomy directing our lives and mastery getting better at things. The third, and arguably the deepest pillar of intrinsic motivation, is purpose.
This is the why behind it all, right? Connecting what we do to something bigger than just ourselves.
Precisely. Without a sense of purpose, even autonomy and mastery can feel a bit empty. Like, I'm free to choose, and I'm getting good at this, but so what?
Viktor Frankl really centered his whole approach, logotherapy, on this, didn't he?
He did. Based on his experiences, including in concentration camps, he argued that the primary human drive isn't pleasure or power, but the search for meaning, fulfilling a purpose.
And he saw that people who survived horrific circumstances often did so because they held on to a sense of purpose, something beyond their immediate suffering.
Yes, a dedication, a spontaneous surrender almost to a greater goal, maybe completing a piece of work, or reuniting with loved ones, or bearing witness. That sense of meaning provided resilience.
And without that overarching purpose, that meaning, our very sense of self can kind of unravel. Oliver Sacks wrote about this.
Yeah, Sachs observed patients, often with neurological issues, who lost the thread of their own life story, their continuous inner narrative.
What happened to them?
They'd fall into what he called a narrational frenzy, constantly creating fragmented, often inaccurate stories, confabulations, trying desperately to patch together a sense of continuity, a sense of self that had been lost.
So purpose provides the storyline, the coherent narrative that holds our identity together.
It provides the anchor, the direction for that story. It tells us who we are and where we're going. And Jordan Peterson connects this search for purpose to the fundamental human condition, the awareness of our own limitations and mortality.
The idea that life involves suffering, that it's inherently challenging.
Right. And that facing this reality, contemplating our own finitude, is actually what drives us to seek meaning, to find redemptive information, to maintain a higher level of consciousness. Purpose becomes our shield against the chaos of existence.
We actively choose meaning because life is difficult.
It's a necessary response. We see a different kind of tension around purpose in Freud's work, too.
Yeah.
He talked about the pleasure principle versus the reality principle.
The idea that satisfying a raw, instinctual urge feels incredibly good may be better than satisfying a more tamed one.
Exactly. There's an intensity to satisfying those wild impulses. But, and this is the crucial part for civilization and purpose,
Yeah.
we have to control those drives.
For society to function, for our own long-term good.
Yes. What Freud called the higher psychical authorities, guided by the reality principle, have to step in and regulate those impulses. It might diminish the peak intensity of pleasure, but it's necessary for stability, for protection, for living together.
So purpose, in a Freudian sense, involves that mature understanding that true fulfillment acquires managing immediate desires for something larger, integration, long-term well-being.
Right. And Freud also had this fascinating observation about humanity's relationship with power and technology.
The God with artificial limbs idea.
Yeah. He said humans created gods, embodying omnipotence and omniscience. Then, through science and technology, we started achieving some of that power ourselves, becoming like gods with prosthetic limbs, extending our senses and abilities. But, Freud noted, modern humans, despite all this godlike power, do not feel happy.
Which perfectly illustrates the need for purpose. Power, control, technology. They aren't enough on their own. They don't provide the meaning.
You need a reason for having all those artificial limbs, a purpose to direct that power towards.
And if we dig even deeper into that universal human quest for meaning, we get to Carl Jung and the collective unconscious.
Jung proposed that beneath our personal unconscious, our own forgotten experiences, there's a deeper layer shared by all humanity.
Not based on personal experience, but inherited.
Yes, consisting of what he called archetypes, universal patterns of possibility, reflected in myths and symbols across cultures. The hero, the shadow, the mother, the wise old man.
These recurring themes and figures in human stories.
Right. Jung believed that tapping into these archetypes, understanding these universal patterns, is part of finding our individual meaning. Our personal quest for purpose isn't just personal. It connects us to these deep, shared, inherited psychological structures.
So finding our purpose isn't just making something up. It's kind of like finding our place within the larger human story.
Okay, so we have these powerful intrinsic drivers: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. How do we bring these down to earth, apply them practically, especially in areas like recovery or building stronger connections?
Self-compassion seems like a really key bridge here. It touches on all three.
Absolutely. Dr. Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion is incredibly valuable, and she makes a crucial distinction that makes it very practical.
Between tender and fierce compassion.
Exactly. She calls self-compassion a superpower with these two sides. It's not just about being soft and gentle with yourself, though that's part of it.
So tender compassion is what we usually think of. Being kind, understanding, comforting yourself when you're hurting.
Right. It's validating your pain, accepting your struggles, giving yourself the warmth you'd offer a friend. You need this when you stumble, when you feel overwhelmed. It's the nurturing side.
Okay, and fierce compassion.
That's the action-oriented side. It's about protecting yourself, motivating yourself, standing up for your needs, setting boundaries, saying no, confronting difficult situations, pushing yourself to make necessary changes.
Like fighting for your own well-being.
Yeah.
Rocking the boat if needed.
Exactly. Tender compassion says, it's okay that you're struggling. Fierce compassion says, and because you matter, we need to do something about this struggle. You need both for sustainable change and recovery.
And Neff argues self-compassion is a direct antidote to shame, right? That awful feeling of, I am bad or I am a mistake.
Yes, she outlines three components of self-compassion that counteract shame. First, mindfulness, just noticing the pain without getting swept away by it, preventing that over-identification.
Second, common humanity, reminding yourself that suffering and imperfection are part of the shared human experience. You're not alone in your struggles. That fights the isolation of shame.
And third, self-kindness, actively being warm and understanding towards yourself rather than harshly critical, allowing yourself to be worthy even with flaws.
And this internal work, this self-compassion, it actually ripples outward into our relationships.
Hugely. Research shows that people high in self-compassion are seen by their partners as warmer, more supportive, and more encouraging of their partner's autonomy.
More than just having high self-esteem.
Yes, it leads to greater relationship satisfaction for both partners because self-compassionate people have more emotional resources. They've filled their own cup, so they have more kindness and support to offer others.
That internal kindness translates externally. This seems especially relevant when dealing with the after effects of trauma, which often involves a profound loss of autonomy and safety.
Definitely. Peter Levine's work on healing trauma really emphasizes tapping into the body's innate capacity to heal itself. It's less about solely talking through the trauma and more about tracking body sensations.
Why the focus on the body?
Because trauma is fundamentally a physiological event. The fight or flight energy gets activated but doesn't complete its cycle. It gets trapped in the nervous system.
And that trapped energy causes problems.
Big problems. Levine suggests is that traumatized people often develop avoidance behaviors, limiting their lives to avoid anything activating precisely to keep that underlying unresolved arousal contained.
Because letting it out feels dangerous.
Terrifyingly so. That trapped survival energy gets rechanneled and misinterpreted as intense fear or rage or deep shame. So the natural discharge process itself feels threatening.
So when Levine talks about honoring physiological rhythms, what does that actually look like for someone trying to heal? It sounds kind of abstract.
It requires a lot of patience and shifting focus inward. It means learning to notice very subtle body sensations, maybe a slight tremor in the hands, a feeling of warmth spreading, a knot in the stomach, a wave of cold, and just allowing them to be there without judging or trying to force them or even necessarily understand them intellectually.
Just letting the sensation run its course.
Yes, these physiological processes have their own rhythm, and it's often very slow compared to our mental pace. They might resolve in a few minutes if we just gently stay present with them, but we usually interrupt them because we're uncomfortable or impatient.
So mastery in trauma recovery involves slowing way down and trusting the body's innate wisdom to process that stuck energy at its own pace, reclaiming that internal autonomy.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
And finally, let's bring these intrinsic drivers, autonomy, mastery, purpose, into our connections with others, because motivation is deeply social.
And a major roadblock to satisfying connection is what Amir Levine and Rachel Heller call the anxious avoidant trap.
Right. This happens in relationships where partners have fundamentally different needs for closeness and independence. One partner, anxious, constantly seeks more intimacy and reassurance, fearing abandonment.
While the other partner, avoidant, feels smothered and constantly seeks more space and autonomy, fearing engulfment.
Exactly. And it becomes a painful cycle. The avoidant partner pulls away, which triggers the anxious partner's fears, making him pursue more intensely, which makes the avoidant partner pull away further.
Leading to really low relationship satisfaction for both.
Substantially lower. The core intimacy needs aren't being met or reciprocated consistently.
So how do intrinsic drivers help break that cycle? It seems like finding shared purpose is key here.
That's definitely a huge part of it. John Gottman, in his research on successful marriages, identifies creating shared meaning as his final principle.
Moving beyond just managing conflict or liking each other to feeling like you're part of a team, a family unit with shared goals.
Precisely. It's about building a sense of us that transcends the individual needs. Developing shared rituals, supporting each other's life dreams, having common values and life goals.
This shared purpose gives the relationship a larger context, something both partners can dedicate themselves to.
Yes, and it can take some of the pressure off the day-to-day friction caused by differing intimacy styles. It elevates the relationship beyond just meeting immediate needs to fulfilling a shared mission.
Gottman also talks about something practical for maintaining that connection. Love maps.
Right. This is about really knowing your partner's inner world, their hopes, fears, stresses, joys, their history, their dreams for the future. maintaining detailed mental maps of each other's lives.
It's a form of mastery almost, mastering the understanding of your partner.
You could see it that way. And that deep, detailed knowledge, that internal map, provides the context and the fortitude to weather the inevitable storms of a long-term relationship. You understand the meaning behind their actions, even difficult ones, because you know their world. It fuels connection and purpose. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay, so pulling all this together, what's the big picture here? If we want true sustainable motivation, especially for challenging things like recovery or lifelong learning.
It means we need a fundamental shift. We have to move away from relying on those external carrots and sticks, what Piaget might call the simple whys of explanation, the cause and effect logic.
And instead, focus on activating our built-in intrinsic drivers.
Exactly. Cultivating autonomy, finding ways to choose our path, even in small ways, pursuing mastery, committing to that consistent identity-focused practice, celebrating progress over perfection.
And connecting to purpose-finding meaning, whether it's through contribution, connection, or aligning with our deepest values, AMP.
And yeah, it's interesting. Freud drew a parallel between the development of civilization and the development of an individual. He said that for the individual, the pursuit of happiness, the pleasure principle, often feels paramount. But integrating into a community, finding a place within the group, realizing a shared purpose, that becomes an almost unavoidable condition for actually achieving lasting fulfillment. Our intrinsic drives don't just serve us, they enable connection.
That's a powerful connection. Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the learner. We've talked about how self-compassion, that fierce and tender self-care, translates into better relationships.
How tending to our own autonomy, mastery, and purpose equips us to connect more deeply.
So the provocative question is this. If cultivating your inner world directly impacts your outer world, what small act of self-directed mastery or maybe tender self-compassion can you choose today? What vote can you cast for the person you want to become tomorrow, sustaining not just your own journey, but also the vital connections that give it meaning?